The 2020 season marked a new beginning for the Raiders as they opened up their palace in Sin City, but the result was pretty much the same. After a promising start, they stumbled down the finish line and missed the postseason for the 17th time in the past 18 seasons. However, they have improved record-wise each year under the John Gruden tenure. And in year 4, Chucky has high expectations for the Silver and Black.
We prove we can compete in the AFC West. You know, we're a couple plays away from being really good in the AFC West.
Gruden is notoriously tough on his own quarterbacks, but Derek Carr responded in 2020 with his best season since being an MVP candidate in 2016. As far as improving a roster that needs a lot of work to do to catch up with the Chiefs in the AFC West, they were certainly busy in the offseason, but whether they're better for it is still to be determined. They disassembled their high-paid offensive line, leaving Colton Miller as their only mainstay up front. In the draft, they did address that unit in round 1 with Alex Leatherwood, but many believed he would have been there in round 2. And recent draft picks have been the one glaring area that has been holding this team back. Many of the so-called reaches that the Raiders valued internally more than most teams since Mike Mayock took over as GM haven't panned out thus far, with Josh Jacobs being the only exception. Is this the year that Gruden could get the most out of this roster and lead them back to the postseason? If not, there may be some warm seats out there in the desert. All right, so it's going to be an interesting year for the Raiders. They could go a lot of different directions there as you take a look at their schedule. Of course, they finished 8-8 last season. And I will tell you already, they're dead last in the AFC West when it comes to the odds. They're 18-1 to win. But can we see some improvement despite those odds? We took Evan Washburn out of Southern California. We sent him to Vegas to check on the Raiders. Evan, give us your initial takeaways from what you're seeing out there.
Well, first of all, it's very hot here in Henderson, Nevada. That's not breaking news, but this team practices very early. They're out on the field at about 7 a.m. local time. They get off at about 9:30, and the temperature's around 100, but they still get a ton of good work in. It was a joy today because they were in full pads. We got to see some good work in terms of 11-on-11, but also 7-on-7 in those one-on-one periods where you've got wide receivers and DBs going at it. And I thought what I was struck with was some of the big plays that this wide receiving core was able to make. And this is with Darren Waller not at practice today. You had Bryan Edwards make a circus catch. Henry Ruggs was great, and Derek Carr was distributing the ball. So I think that was the biggest takeaway beyond the conditions here.
You're just complaining because you're from Maryland and you were in LA. We're in southern Florida here. You can't complain. The heat is fine. They're going to be okay. Sure. Let's talk about Derek Carr because he came out recently saying, look, I don't want to play for anyone else. I don't ever want to play for another team. He also told The Athletic that he thinks this is the best team they've had in a while. So I'm curious, what do you make of those comments, and do you agree with them?
Well, I think Derek Carr is always the eternal optimist, and he really is starting to feel synonymous with the Raiders, whether they were in Oakland or now Las Vegas. So the idea of them moving on from him at this point does seem to be a bit challenging. But this is a big year for Derek Carr, both contractually with the way it looks the next 2 seasons and just with expectations, having not been in the postseason for such a long time. And I would agree with them. When you look across the roster, especially offensively, there is a lot of talent. Now it's a question of potential meeting expectation. I mentioned the wide receiver core. That's a group who really has to elevate their game. We know what Darren Waller can bring. And then offensive line. They lost some good players there, but they brought in some young players. That's the term you're going to hear a lot, Amanda, is youth with the Raiders and potential. And if that's matched and they meet the expectations, I'm right there with Derek Carr. This could be the best team he's led in all of his time, now 8 years in the league.
You mentioned the wide receivers earlier. They have Henry Ruggs entering his 2nd season there. Added John Brown in free agency. He said, look, I'm no Henry Ruggs, but I'm going to try. Hunter Renfrow as well. What do you make of this receiving core?
I think it's really intriguing because Darren Waller is basically a wide receiver. He's an elite level wide receiver, but he plays in line at tight end. And then if you can match that with Henry Ruggs and his speed, and what they will tell you here in Las Vegas is a dimension too. He's not just that straight line burner. He's a route runner. He added about 13 pounds reportedly to his frame to be a bit more durable. Hunter Renfrow's the always get open on 3rd down guy, perfect for the slot. The name to keep an eye on though is Bryan Edwards. Edwards, the second rounder from a year ago. He was banged up most of last year, but his body type resembles those elite big-bodied receivers. He's even been compared to Terrell Owens at times, John Gruden obviously knowing Owens well. So that's where I think offensively the real question mark remains is, can that group pick up their production to help balance what Waller's inevitably going to bring you from the tight end position?
Okay, Darren Waller, in your words, basically a tight end. We know he's or basically a wide receiver, but I want to talk about him as a tight end because they've gotten so much attention over the years because we've got guys like Travis Kelce, George Kittle. Darren Waller, as a tight end, not a wide receiver, where do you rank him in the NFL?
He's in the top 5 for me. I mean, I've got Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Waller in there, and actually just spoke with him a few minutes ago. I mean, just an unbelievable guy, and an unreal story from where he came from a few years ago to where he is now and what he's done the last 2 seasons. And he's not really worried about his numbers. His numbers were great last year. Ideally, they would spread those numbers around to get some of that to the wide receivers, and he's good with that. Where his focus lies, and I mentioned Kittle and Kelce, he watches those guys because he's seeing so much double coverage now and that bracket coverage, and he set a focus this offseason was just seeing where he could be productive, find seams and holes in a defense, knowing that he's going to be priority number 1 from every coordinator when they prepare for the Raiders.
Evan, let's talk about this defense here because last season I had to sit next to Pete Prisco all season and hear him rant about the Raiders defense and how awful they were and how terrible they were. They've tried to fix some things. What can we expect this upcoming season?
Well, first of all, I apologize that that's your life. Hopefully you're being paid well. But for this defense here in Las Vegas, a lot of change, and most notably the direction of it under Gus Bradley, who we know has a history of producing really high-end defensive units, whether it was in Seattle, in his time in Jacksonville, while not successful as a head coach, and then with the LA Chargers most recently. So he comes in, they add some depth to a defensive line with Yannick Ngakoue out of Baltimore and Solomon Thomas from San Francisco, and then you patch those guys up with Max Crosby, who had a breakout last couple of years, and there's just hope that that pass rush can just be more productive because that was really a hole in this defense. And then the secondary is much like the wide receiver core, Amanda, a ton of youth, a ton of high-end draft capital, but now it's about meeting the potential and meeting expectations. And if those things can happen, this defense can be good. And it appears to me to be one of those things where they don't have to be elite. They just can't lose this Raiders team's games.
Good is a good word. The defense could be good. We're going to go with that. All right, let's talk about the team as a whole. Evan, your expectations, as I mentioned, they are dead last in the AFC West when it comes to the odds, 18-1 odds. They went 8-8 last season. They have not been to the postseason since 2016. Before that, it was 2002 when they lost in the Super Bowl. What do you think about the Raiders in 2021?
That surprises me because I definitely have them ahead of the Denver Broncos, and it's a similar discussion we had a few days ago with the LA Chargers. I think it's the Chargers and Raiders competing for that second spot in the AFC West because Kansas City is just such a juggernaut at this point. I don't see either of those teams, including the Raiders, surmounting them in the standings. But the wild card to me seems to be a reasonable goal to have. Inevitably, the goal here would be to win the division, but being a wild card team, to me, is something that can be achievable if all of these pieces and these question marks and these youthful groups can realize expectation and potential and they can stay healthy. I think this team is a 9-win type team and one that, again, can compete for a playoff spot.
All right, very nice. Stay safe out there. Stay cool. Have fun at Raiders training camp. We'll see you at your next stop. Evan Washburn, thanks so much. As I mentioned, our guys, they are hopping around the country, making sure to check out all of these training camps, bring you live reports here on CBS Sports HQ. Today, we're talking to Pete Prisco, who is there with the Dolphins. He says it is all about Tua, what we can expect from him in year 2. And then tomorrow, we're going to be with the Chiefs and Saints. Pete heading down to New Orleans. He's going to be with the Saints there. And we got the Seahawks on Friday.
Want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.